Ashland, Oregon is a theatrical town. And in a theatrical town, one needs a costume shop. And that's why I'm standing here with the new owner of the Renaissance Rose, Ann Wilton. Ann's going to take us through some fashion highlights. Ann, what are we starting off with today?
Well, John here, we have dressed as a pirate from about the 17th century. And you might say, well, how did we decide that this is how a pirate should look? Why did we wear what we wore? Why was a pirate dressed like a nobleman? Well, he probably looted his complete outfit from the victims that he was pirating. So maybe this was a Lord Dipstick's clothing trunk that he got his coat out of, but his pants came from someone else and his boots from somewhere else too. But what I want to talk about today is why we have stereotyped this look for a pirate and why ladies wore what they wore. I want to call your attention to the lovely white plume that he has in his hat. Well, King Charles, one of the kings of France in about 1600, was a very valiant military man. And he used to say to his soldiers, "Follow mon blanche pinoche." And the word pinoche is plume, blanc meaning white. And so all of his soldiers could see him riding across the battlefield with this dashing white feather. And that's why the word pinoche came to mean someone who is dashing. Another little fashion tidbit that we get from the gentlemen's coats, you might wonder why we have buttons on a cuff. The cuff doesn't button. Why would they need to be there? Well, in the British Navy, sailors who didn't very well use their handkerchiefs used to wipe their noses on their cuffs. Oh dear. Well, the officers thought that was terrible, and so they deemed that all the coats should have buttons sewn onto the cuffs so that the sailors could not wipe their nose. They were called snotties in the British Army. And now, getting back to his famous plume, everyone knows the song Yankee Doodle Dandy. Well, where do you think that comes from? And the song goes, he came into town riding on a pony. He stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. What's that all about? Well, at that time, Thomas Jefferson had just come back from France, and he brought macaroni, which was an Italian food product, with him. And it was quite the fad to eat pasta back then. So to eat macaroni was considered a faddish thing to do. And to stick a feather in your hat and to be a dandy, to be a dressed up gentleman and ride into town with all your finery, that would be considered foppish. So a dandy and a macaroni were both foppish concepts. And hence we get Yankee Doodle Dandy. And now I'm going to switch horses, as they say, and talk about some ladies' fashion. Over to some ladies' fashion tidbits. Here's our lovely Brenna modeling some of the undergarments a lady would have worn in about 1860 in America, right about the time that the Civil War started. At that time, ladies were very much at the mercy of their undergarments because not only did they wear tight corsets, but they had many, many layers of heavy petticoats to hold up those beautiful bell-shaped skirts. So when the hoop petticoat came out and was invented, a lady all of a sudden lost a lot of weight because there were metal bands that gently held up the skirt without all the bulk. And you can, at that time, her feet were not supposed to show, and it was considered very seductive to have a little sway in the walk, and hence the bell-shaped, yes, walk away from us, and the bell-shaped was considered very appealing to the gentlemen of the time, and the ladies liked to be noticed, but of course they didn't want their feet to show. On the other hand, hoop skirts did present a bit of a problem when you tried to sit down. They'd sometimes flip up in the front, showing your feet, which of course they didn't want. So the way a proper lady would sit down was to gather the hoops up in the back and then carefully sit down and tuck her skirts in around her. Very nice. Today, the corset has become not an undergarment anymore, but it's actually become an outerwear garment. Hence, we see all different kinds of colors and decorations being worn at local proms and dances. Renaissance Rose has been one of Ashland's favorite stores for over 30 years. In our newly reopened downstairs, we have a full selection of vintage clothing, costumes, and lovely ethnic pieces too. Feel free to come in and make an appointment to work with our friendly staff to put together any kind of costume that you need for any decade through the ages, or even things like the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus.